going to be a great year. Complicated, but great.
Thank you for being with us.
Really appreciate it very much.
I think you deserve a vacation.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. President. Happy birthday.
Perfect conversation. If they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Biden. They should investigate the Biden. And by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Biden. Saluting, shaking, turning, spinning. Felt like a great fighter pilot. We're building the wall. It's going up rapidly. We have tremendous help from Mexico, despite what you read. Other countries do. We can't. I would never do that. But how do you stop these people? You can't. There's no... That's only in the panhandle you can get away with that statement. Only in the panhandle. 1 out of every 4 circuit judges currently on the bench was appointed by this administration. The average age of my newly appointed circuit court judges is less than 50. That's 10 years younger than President Obama's nominees. Now we go to a new year. I think they're tired, and I think everybody's tired.
Let me begin by saying I took great personal offense to everything you just said.
Secretary DeVos, I want to start by telling you a story about my constituent, Artemisa. Back in 2009, she became a student at Heald College in Modesto, just months after it was purchased by Corinthian Colleges. Artemisa wanted to make a difference in her community. She was pursuing a medical assistant degree. She chose Heald because she saw on the commercials that it had an 85% job placement rate. Seemed like a good investment. But then she graduated and she couldn't find a job. And now she owes a whopping $40,000 in student loan debt for a degree that hasn't helped her get hired. That may not seem like a lot of money to you, Secretary DeVos, but in the real world, that's devastating. Turns out, Artemisa wasn't alone in not being able to find a job. Corinthian colleges across the country lied about their job placement rate. They told her it was an 85% job placement rate for HEALD. Turns out the actual rate was 0, not 85%, 0. That's a big difference. Artemisa and tens of thousands of students were defrauded by Corinthian. We all know this, we all agree. In 2014, the Department of Education fined them $30 million for this fraud. Everyone agreed. But here, 5 years later, Artemisa still has that $40,000 in student loan debt. She still hasn't found a job in her field, and she hasn't gotten any help whatsoever. The reason for that is because you have put roadblock after roadblock in front of helping these students. Your job is to fight for them, but instead, your actions suggest you would prefer to be the chief lobbyist for the predatory schools that defrauded them. After being ordered by a federal court to stop collecting debts from cheated Corinthian students, you ignored the order and kept stealing money from these students. You were even held in contempt of court because of it. You're not standing up for them, you're working for the schools that defrauded them. Maybe you've forgotten to refund these students. Maybe Artemisa's $40,000 in student loan debt just doesn't sound like a lot to you because it's only 1/10 of 1% of one of your family's 10 yachts. Artemisa and tens of thousands of others have been waiting years for your help. You have deliberately violated a federal court order, and I'm confused why. So I guess I just have one question for you, Secretary DeVos. Are you deliberately violating this federal court order because you are too corrupt to uphold the law, or because you're too incompetent to do your job?
The gentleman will address the facts and figures and not question the character of the witness.
Secretary DeVos, why have you been held in contempt of court?
Well, Congressman, let me begin by saying I took great personal offense to everything you just said. I come to my job every day on behalf of students.
In the first few months of this program, under DeVos, they've only forgiven fully only 1,000 people, and that's out of tens of thousands that have petitioned.
I don't need to sit and listen to what you just spewed out of your mouth.
I don't understand how you can take...
I did not defy any court order. I instructed federal student aid to follow the court order.
The reality is there are tens of thousands of students whose financial futures have been ruined by 3 years of inaction. And you're just making excuses. You're blaming this problem on somebody else. You've been Secretary of Education for 3 years. And you are trying to defy the facts of this matter. Yes or no, were you held in contempt of court and fined?
Congressman, I have not been able to address all of the Corinthian College claims because a court stopped us in May of 2018.
So they are trying to match up your income with the amount of money that you're going to get back, which is a principle that seems to be not relevant to some student advocates. They say, look, if your college defrauded you, it doesn't really matter how you're doing financially now. The point is that you didn't get what you were promised.
The courts said there was nothing stopping the department from processing these borrower defense claims.
There was something stopping. There was a lack of process. The court said we could simply forgive them all, but that was not the right answer. The right answer is to do what's right for students and to do what's right for taxpayers. And that is my goal, and that is going to continue to be my goal.
What's right for students is helping the tens of thousands of students who have been defrauded, students like Artemisa. And blaming this problem on somebody else, taking 3 years to make absolutely no progress, it's not helping these students. It is only helping the scam colleges that defrauded them.
Hi, how's it going?
Great, how are you?
Deputy with the Sheriff's Office. The reason I stopped you is the guy's going about over 90 miles an hour, weaving through traffic, not using your guys' turn signals. Okay. Got your registration and insurance as well, too, please. Where you guys headed?
Flagstaff.
Flagstaff? What's going on in Flagstaff?
We're doing a memorial hike.
Oh, yeah?
For an officer who was killed in the line of duty.
Oh, wow, I appreciate you guys doing that. Was it the Flagstaff?
So it was actually my late cousin, Bruce Harrell, who's a DPS.
Oh, really?
Same department the Colonel was moved through.
Oh, my goodness.
It was a helicopter accident.
Helicopter
A
accident?
long time. It's 10 years ago.
It's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear
It's
that.
okay. No, it's okay.
All right, well, thank you. I'll be right back. Oh, yeah? Yeah?
I don't know if that'll help at all.
What is it? You're,
He's the Colonel. He was DPS.
Oh, well, pleasure to meet you.
Sorry to meet you under such circumstances.
Nope, not a problem. All right, your guys' information back. Appreciate your time. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Your sheriff actually is one of my favorite people.
What's that?
I love Scott Sheriff Masher. He's one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, he's cool.
I was sitting there thinking, well, one of his guys about to write me a ticket. A long ago. I'm a dumbass. I was going too fast. I got a ticket. And anyway, I was just kind of smiling because I know he just bust my balls.
Yeah.
I appreciate the break. I'm sorry to bother you.
No worries. I'm just educating, just kind of, it's the purpose of the stop, just educating people, But,
Tell me your name.
It's Cody Winton.
Hi, Cody Frank Milstead. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Nice to meet you. All right, you guys drive safe, okay? Thank you.
So is there anything that you think that Donald Trump could do that would warrant impeachment? Or sure.
High crimes are misdemeanors.
Sure. So you don't think exploiting military aid?
I don't think that he exploited military aid. Again,
Really?
you keep asserting these premises that aren't true.
So you're going to have the president's back no matter what?
That's not true.
I think you made that pretty clear, right?
No, you're, again,
Because I think the concern
of
of me and fellow veterans is that we both swore the same oath. If you're not willing to hold Trump accountable to his oath of office, then you are betraying yours.
Well, I disagree with your characterization that he has betrayed his oath or that I've betrayed mine, but that's why we've got this great country where people get to
Absolutely, freedom of speech, like us having this conversation here, yeah. If democracy is sacred, and Trump has multiple times,
Hold on, I take exception with the premise of the question. But yeah, it's super important, but not necessarily sacred.
Oh, so democracy is not sacred?
Well, sacred implies something regarding God and faith. I think
Didn't Donald Trump, in releasing the transcript, already admit to
No, the transcript
bribery?
doesn't show any conditionality.
Do me a favor, though. Doesn't show any conditionality. So here's the thing. I think veterans around the country are kind of sick of this line, this of inauthenticity coming from folks like you.
It's very authentic.
Because if you're not
how do you
willing,
know what my authenticity is, right? You sit here.
it's a good question. How would I know?
I think it's very clear that he is using our foreign policy for personal gain, and that's not the role of the president. Well, the fact that he used military aid to try and extract a favor from the foreign government to interfere in our election Well, it's still, if you try to commit a crime and you don't, you're still tried, and that still counts to me, sir. That's what I learned in the Marine Corps. If you share your perspective, I want to have a genuine conversation. So if you really want to have a genuine conversation, all we can ask is that you follow the facts and that you put, partisan interests aside, because this is about not just this president, it's about every president that comes after.
So you're going to have the president's back no matter what?
That's not true.
I think you made that pretty clear, right?
No, again,
because I think the concern of me and fellow veterans is that we both swore the same oath. If you're not willing to hold Trump accountable to his oath of office, then you are betraying yours.
Well, I disagree with your characterization that he has betrayed his oath or that I've betrayed mine.
The question now is on Article 1 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for abusing his powers. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner?
No.
Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Shabbat?
No.
Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gomert?
My vote is no.
Mr. Gomert votes no. Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck?
No.
Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Radcliffe? Mr. Radcliffe votes no. Ms. Roby? No. Ms. Roby votes no. Mr. Gates?
No.
Mr. Gates votes no. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana?
No.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs?
No.
Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock votes no. Ms. Lesko?
No.
Ms. Lesko votes no. Mr. Reschenthaler?
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein?
No.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe?
No.
Mr. Stubbe votes no.
Has every member voted who wishes to vote?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask how I'm recorded?
How is the gentleman recorded?
Mr. Gomert, you are recorded as no.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
The question now is on Article 2 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for obstructing Congress. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner?
No.
Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Shabbat? Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gomert?
No.
Mr. Gomert votes no. Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck? Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Radcliffe? Mr. Radcliffe votes no. Ms. Roby?
No.
Ms. Roby votes no. Mr. Gates?
No.
Mr. Gates votes no. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana?
No.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs?
No.
Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock votes no. Ms. Lesko?
No.
Ms. Lesko votes no. Mr. Reschenthaler?
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein?
No.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe?
No.
Mr. Stubbe votes no.
The article is agreed to. The resolution is amended as ordered reported favorably to the House.